Welcome everybody to our June 22nd, 2021 Clearinghouse on Women's Issues meeting. Today we're talking about celebrating Title IX's 49th birthday with the reintroduction of the Gender Equity Education Act. And what we'll plan for the meeting is first I'll try and give a background and history of some of the issues related to Title IX. Then we're going to be joined by Ben Strand, who will address a lot of the questions that were in the agenda. Ben has been working on the Gender Equity Education Act for several years, since it was introduced in 2016, correct, Ben?
It was, yes, and reintroduced a few times since then.
Right. And unfortunately, Laura Ferraro was unable to join us at the last minute. She's the co-introducer of GEEA from Representative Doris Matsui's office from California. And the reintroduction of WEA is very appropriate for Title IX's 40th anniversary. In next year, Title IX will celebrate its 50th anniversary, and the usual practice is for the National Coalition for Women and Girls in Education to write a report to every 5 years on the history and the accomplishments and the new challenges for Title IX. So next year we'll be working on a report on Title IX at 50. It's a 5-year report for the National Coalition for Women and Girls in Education. And we hope that one of the victories that we'll be able to report in that report is the passage of the Gender Equity in Education Act that's being introduced tomorrow. And Ben is working on all the details and will give you information on how to find it with its new numbers, etc. What I thought I would do, since I have a long perspective as a former Department of Education employee interested in gender equity, is give you a little bit of the history as I know it of the elements that go into the Gender Equity Education Act. I'll start off. In addition to Title IX's 49th anniversary tomorrow, we are of course delighted to celebrate the reintroduction of GEEA by Senator Mazie Hirono, Ben's boss, and Representative Doris Matsui. I'm especially happy because I worked on gender equity in education in the U.S. Department of Education and its Office of Education predecessor. The Department of Education was formed in 1980. I worked on those on gender equity issues whenever I could in the 34 years that I was with the Department of Education before I joined FMF in 2003. In the Department of Education, I got to work specifically on the NIE, that's the National Institute of Education, women's research team, which was formed in 1978 and lasted to 1981. I was detailed to the National Advisory Council on Women's Education Programs from 1981 to 1982 out of the research office. And other times I worked on gender equity assignments along with my dissemination and evaluation responsibilities. I learned how the Department of Education worked but was always disappointed that an important topic like Title IX and gender equity was given relatively little attention and resources. The Gender Equity Education Act has two purposes. One is to create an Office for Gender Equity reporting directly to the Secretary of Education, and two, to manage a grants program with related dissemination, research, and evaluation components to facilitate an effective Title IX gender equity infrastructure with vertical and horizontal components to help well-trained Title IX coordinators and their allies work together to decrease and hopefully eliminate sex discrimination in and through education. I will address what I know of the history and need for these components of WEA. To start out with, we'll start with the Office for Gender Equity in the Department of Education. Although other agencies have offices related to gender equity, women's health, etc., the Department of Education has never really had a high-level office dealing with gender equity and coordinating activities throughout. However, in reviewing the history, I noted that in 1993, there was a new federal gender equity funding initiative that was introduced as part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And this initiative included the creation of an office for gender equity with a full-time coordinator in ed, an expansion of gender equity research and training, and more resources for gender equity related to math, science, sexual harassment, and athletics. This was not passed as part of the ESEA legislation. However, in 1994, the U.S. Department of Education Organization Act, the Department of Ed was started in 1980, was changed to include a special assistant for gender equity to advise the secretary and the deputy secretary to promote and coordinate gender equity programs and to provide technical assistance. However, there was not much attention to this position, and it has not been filled since the end of the Clinton administration. Over the years, there have been various programs that funded some gender equity work in the Department of Education. The most well-known of these programs was the Women's Educational Equity Act that was passed in 1974. It lasted for almost 3 decades until 2003. And what the WEA primarily funded was model grants programs. How many of you remember WEA, and have any of you ever received a WEA program? If you could just raise your hand, that would be interesting.
I remember.
A few of you are doing that, so that's great. For others, WEA was a very popular program, and its competitive grants were received many applications over the years. I was a reviewer for often for many of these years. And what we did with these grants is they also had a good evaluation component. So we tried to identify the best of them, and they were put in catalogs and distributed widely. At its highest annual amount of money that it received was $10 million in 1980. Throughout its history, we have funded around 800 projects through its National Competitive Grants Program. WEA was mainly located in the elementary and secondary education programs office, but the WEA program could also fund post-secondary and adult model projects as well. And it had a very important component, the Equity Resource Center. And for a few years when I was working in the Office of Research, I was lucky enough to monitor the Equity Resource Center, which did various things and provided technical assistance. Other gender equity funding throughout the Department of Education was in the vocational ed, sex equity coordinators, the FIPSE program, that's the Fund for the Improvement of Post-Secondary Education at a small women's oriented program, the Civil Rights Title IV program. I think I saw some of you from the current equity assistance centers on the meeting today. In its early days, it even had a separate sex equity technical assistance center. In subsequent years, sex equity was combined with centers that also had responsibility for race and other types of educational equity. And at various years, it got to be a very small portion of those programs, but it was still maintained throughout and is even alive today. Maybe some of the participants in this meeting will fill us in on some of their gender equity activities today. There were other programs, like there was an Office of Educational Research and Improvement where I worked, Minorities and Women's R&D Training Program, and there were efforts to disaggregate data by sex and other characteristics in the National Center for Education Statistics, which has always been part of the research offices in the U.S. Department of Education. Now, I'll discuss some of the historical markers in the other key purpose of the Gender Equity Education Act, that's building the grants program, which primarily focuses on Title IX coordinators and the gender equity infrastructure. The OCR, the Office for Civil Rights, gave some attention to Title IX coordinators, but never directly funded them. I'd like to mention right now, call attention to Jeanette Esbrook, who in many of these years was the Director of Program Legal in the Office for Civil Rights. Anyway, when Ken Marcus was Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights in 2004, he wrote to post-secondary institutions and superintendents of state education agencies and local school districts to remind them to designate Title IX coordinators to carry out their responsibility. This included notifying students and employees of their name, address, and telephone numbers of the Title IX coordinators. The WEA Equity Resource Center also maintained a list of state Title IX coordinators and provided assistance to these Title IX coordinators. Not much more happened that I'm aware of until the Obama administration came in, especially the second part of the Obama administration, and they requested and posted a full list of Title IX coordinators in post-secondary institutions as part of their required Clery reports. And they later requested information on Title IX school district coordinators in the civil rights data collection, which is still maintained. And hopefully we'll now be collecting annual information. So we'll have another listing of Title IX coordinators in school districts, which is very important. And the Obama administration also helped by establishing extensive guidelines and suggestions for the roles and responsibilities of Title IX coordinators in 2015. However, bad news is that as they were leaving, the boss Department of Education rescinded these guidance documents. In 2016, the Feminist Majority Foundation, I and Karen Humphrey, is Karen on, wrote a report on reinvigorating the role of the Title IX coordinator, a requirement and a resource, which pointed out that there need to be many more Title IX trained coordinators in working in a supportive infrastructure to fully implement Title IX. The Department of Education and the Obama administration made good progress in starting to pay attention to Title IX coordinators, but it never explicitly recommended that local schools should have their own Title IX coordinator working with their required school district Title IX coordinators. They asked and got information on many school district Title IX coordinators, but never asked the schools, public schools that were responsible for implementing Title IX to establish their own Title IX coordinators. Some did, but this is not done universally. And one of the things that I've been recommending through the years is that we would have close to 100,000 Title IX coordinators if all the schools in the school districts also had their own Title IX coordinators. In summary, I'd like to say that we're delighted with the, well, I must admit that I helped to some extent in 2010. The FMF and others developed a proposal for the reauthorization of GEEA, which had long expired. This reauthorization never got introduced, but it was influential then, I think, in developing the 2016 version of the Gender Equity Education Act that was introduced by then Senator Hirono and Representative Louise Slaughter, who has since passed. We need help with implementing Title IX as specified in the expanded GEEA to be introduced tomorrow on Title IX's 49th anniversary. It's needed now more than ever. And in my view, we need to pass the new GEEA soon, but we can actually start on some of the key components of the Gender Equity Education Act, such as implementing the Office for Gender Equity in the Department of Education, even before the act is passed, and revising new guidance on Title IX coordinators' roles and responsibilities, since the past guidance was rescinded by Betsy DeVos. The new guidance should specify that pre-K through 12 schools are responsible for implementing the Title IX should have, and that they should have their own Title IX coordinators who work with the school district Title IX coordinators who work with the state agency Title IX coordinators. Now I'd like to turn it over to Ben, who will address many of the nitty-gritty issues related to the reintroduction of Title IX. Ben, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Well, thank you, Sue. I appreciate that introduction, as well as kind of the detailed history behind the issue. I think, we're very excited to be reintroducing GEEA this week. Like you mentioned, Sue, we're going to be reintroducing that tomorrow, Wednesday, to commemorate the 49th anniversary of Title IX being signed into law. Again, Senator Hirono is very excited. It's been a priority for her for the last few Congresses. So that'll happen tomorrow. And I think, Sue, I think you did a really good job really great job of covering what GEEA is and the need for GEEA. I'm happy to speak for a few minutes about kind of what some of the changes are that we've made since the last Congress, and then kind of discuss, how we're planning to build support for the bill and kind of what we see as the next steps forward for the bill. So turning to some of the changes, and again, before I even start, I should thank Sue and all the others who provided feedback on the bill. It's been a good process. I think it's by no means a perfect bill at this point, but it's certainly stronger than I think last Congress, and a lot of that is due to feedback that we've gotten over the last few months. But again, some of the changes. So we've updated findings from the last Congress, so that's pretty standard. We've included some expanded protections to make sure that we're preventing discrimination based on color. There's some new definitions for sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity that we didn't have during the previous version or in the previous version that are consistent with those that are included in the Equality Act. So that was some feedback that we had received. And then we did also include a new definition for something we're calling national gender equity infrastructure, which defined in the bill is we're calling it the horizontal and vertical network of Title IX coordinators and allies who are working on these issues. And that occurs throughout the bill. Not only do we have a new definition, but it's also included in the purposes, and there's an allowable use to focus on that new concept that we're trying to build here. And then some of the other key changes, we would like the new Office of Gender Equity to coordinate with the White House Gender Policy Council, as well as the Domestic Policy Council. So that's also included. And then last but not least, we did include a substantial increase in the funding that we're requesting. Previously, I think it had been 80 million over 6 years. So we've doubled that to 160 million over 5 years, which I think is consistent with what some of the groups have called for increasing OCR by doubling that. So again, those are some of the key changes. There's some other nitty-gritty changes that will be in the bill that we reintroduce tomorrow. But again, I think those are some of the main ones. And then as far as building support for the bill, so we were very excited last Congress to have some pretty solid support. We're currently in the process of circulating the bill for co-sponsors. So right now we have, I think it's about 6, just looking at my notes here. But Senator Van Hollen, Senator Schatz, Merkley, Wyden, Markey, and Cantwell. And again, we're still working to build that list. And we'd like to, at the very least, add most of the co-sponsors we had last Congress and build from there. But again, that's not a process that stops after we reintroduce tomorrow. I think that's something we'll continue to try to do in building support for the bill going forward. And then as far as increasing support for the bill, again, we're going to try to, tomorrow we view as kind of putting the bill down as a marker, and we'd really like to build support from there. If there are offices who you think may be interested in supporting the bill, we're always happy to hear from you, and would be happy to reach out to them. I can actually include my email in the chat box for those who have recommendations or questions about the bill, but I'll do that toward the end of this conversation. And then again, on the path forward, I think we view this as a marker, certainly not the end of the issue after we reintroduce tomorrow. I think, one thing, and I've discussed this with Sue and others, as well as Laura from Congresswoman Matsui's office. But one thing that's different this time around from last Congress is that we have a friendly administration that I think has shown that it really wants to engage on this issue. So, one of the things we'll be looking at is how the senator can engage with the administration to kind of move some of these issues forward, even if it's not through the enactment of GEEA, but if there's other steps we can take in the meantime to work with them. So I think that's another thing the senator is really excited about. So again, I think those are the main pieces that I had for today. Again, really wanted to thank everyone who's provided feedback throughout the process. Again, it's a strong bill. We're excited about it. Oh, and then I should also mention, since Sue, I think you mentioned this at the top of the conversation, but after we file the bill tomorrow, we should hopefully have a bill number by the end of the day or Thursday at the latest. So we're happy to share that as well in case people are actually would like to take a look at the bill text and just get more information in general. But again, I appreciate all the feedback folks have provided over the last few months. Thank you for letting me be a part of this conversation here today. We're excited for the bill reintroduction. And lastly, I'll include my contact information in the chat box in case people have other questions and would like to reach out.
Thank you so much, Ben. Now it's plenty of time for questions. So please pitch in.
Hi, Ben. My name's Lisa Sales. I was a leader in the VA Ratify ERA movement and effort to get Virginia to be the 38th state, and worked on the stand-up of the Gender Policy Council on the domestic policy committee on Biden for president. And I'm the chair of the Fairfax County Commission for Women, the outgoing chair. So thank you for being here. Question I had for you is I was hoping, as the ERA is the constitutional underpinning for all of these gender inequality issues that we're speaking about, and I had the folks from Hawaii reach out to you as well, but looking to see if perhaps the good senator would be willing to be one of the faces of ERA in the Senate. And oh, by the way, I'm also on the advisory council of the ERA coalition. And so hoping to bring you and Senator Cortez Masto together to maybe be the faces of ERA and sort of be the whip. And whenever we talk about paid family medical leave, gender equity, and all of these related women's issues, if that could be weaved in to their talking points when they go on camera. And also we have a couple of PR firms working with us, and we would be happy to support you, your office, the staff, and the senator in any way with talking points, or also placement in the news, on TV, and op-eds.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I appreciate all of that. I will say, I'm happy to connect offline and have a conversation about it. I think you mentioned a lot of important issues to the senator. We have an entire team here in DC that works on some of these issues. I know they're sometimes diverse. So whether that's our judiciary team or social services team, but happy to connect offline and have that conversation. And again, I'll include my contact information in the chat box.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Of course, of course.
Other questions? Concerns? Suggestions?
Hi, it's Toni Van Pelt, and I just want to say, Ben, I just want to thank you all for this and for the presentation, and of course you, Sue, for always being the leading light on this. So I just want you to know how much we in the women's community really appreciate your leadership in this and her leadership. Thanks. No question.
Thank you, Toni. No, and I should also say thank you to Sue. She's been very helpful through this process. We've gotten a lot of feedback. And again, we really feel like we have a strong bill here. So thank you.
Hi, this is Jill Christensen. And Ben, thank you very much for your presentation. I am thrilled to hear that the language of the Equality Act and GEEA are in line with each other. Can you tell me and/or tell us about that initiative and how it got to that point? Because certainly I think that will help support both.
Sure, no, thank you, Jill. I appreciate the question. And I think, going back to last Congress, again, we didn't necessarily have an administration. I shouldn't say they were unfriendly, but we didn't necessarily see eye to eye on some of these issues. We had excluded some of the definitions that were included in the Equality Act, just as a technical issue. Just in speaking with help, we thought it would be more helpful to include a definition for sex and then make sure that we were emphasizing that included some of sexual orientation and gender identity. I think now, given that we have a more friendly administration, we felt a little more comfortable including some of those definitions just to make sure that we were absolutely clear what we were talking about. So again, another change from last Congress, we were happy to include those added definitions. I think it's a stronger bill for it. So that's the bottom line.
Yeah. This is Karen Humphrey from California. Ben, thank you. I'm delighted that my own Congresswoman is in partnership with Senator Hirono on this, and the leadership has been great. This is more a comment than a question. My guess is that the second this bill is introduced, it will go on the growing pile of bills that Mitch McConnell will not allow to go through the Senate, because it's a civil rights bill, although what it's really about is implementing civil rights. I don't know whether there might be an effort if the filibuster is adjusted in any way to open up voting rights as something that's filibuster proof. I don't know whether there would be any hope of getting other civil rights bills into that. I'm so appreciative of your office, your senator, and those who've been working on this for years. And Sue is a role model for Sue and Connie, and a lot of people on this call are tremendous role models. But it's time. I mean, the rollback on gender equity has just been so frustrating over the years, and the only time we can move it in, for sure, in my belief, is this 2-year period. So any thoughts you have about that are appreciated. I don't want to put you in a box, but I do think adjusting the filibuster is going to be essential to have any chance of getting this bill passed, unless you can get 10 Republican co-sponsors. And are you reaching out to Republicans?
I was just going to say thank you, Karen, and I appreciate the comments. I am not an expert on the filibuster by any means. I think, and when it comes to civil rights, I work very closely with our judiciary team. We have an entire team of lawyers here in DC. But I think the senator has been very clear that we need to look at some sort of reform on the issue. Not exactly sure what that will look like. But I appreciate the comments. I think it's something we'll certainly have to think about as far as the next year and a half is concerned. So I appreciate you raising that. Thank you.
Karen, I was also suggesting to Ben that it be perhaps put in the reconciliation packages, that since it's a funding bill, it might qualify for those. But Ben pointed out that we have to get good, solid support for the GEEA even before that happens. Ben, do you want to expand on that?
Sure. No. So I think whether it's reconciliation or some other vehicle that we look at, I think the most important thing is that we've put down a marker, or later this week we'll do that. There are, in talking to Sue, I did raise there are some issues with reconciliation and limitations on what you can pass. But whether it's reconciliation again or some other vehicle, I think it's important that we lay down the bill, have a strong showing of support from co-sponsors, and then we're kind of on the record and can look for opportunities from there. But another thing I did also want to mention is, we are, once we've introduced the bill this week, we are looking forward to working with the administration where we can engage with them. So I think that's another avenue, even if we're unable to do something legislatively, where we can push for some of these changes to be made, administratively through the department or otherwise. And so I think you folks had led a letter earlier this year that's kind of in a similar vein. So again, looking for opportunities there.
Yes, I'll just fill in the National Coalition for Women and Girls in Education, and a separate sign-on letter signed on by over 100 organizations requested the to be announced Secretary of Education to create an office for gender equity in the department. And as the history that I reviewed mentioned, that legislation is already authorized, so the secretary could do that. We just need to see about getting him on board with the key elements of GEEA.
Sue, can I make a quick comment? This is Beth Corbin. Sue, can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay, I just want to make a quick comment to Ben while he's here. First of all, Ben, please let your Senator Hirono know that she is one of my very favorites in the Senate, and I smile every time I see her appear on MSNBC. With regard to the filibuster, I know that I would love to see the filibuster done away with, but I know that there are probably not enough votes to make that happen. So one suggestion that I wish you would please share with her is to make it a talking filibuster, so that the onus of responsibility with regard to the filibuster falls to the party that wants to engage in a filibuster, and they would have to have 41 people on the floor, and they would have to keep continually talking if they wanted to filibuster something, because I think it would actually not be a bad idea for the American public to see who's holding everything up. And so if we could at least switch to a talking filibuster, I think that's something that Senator Manchin has possibly hinted that he might be in agreement with. And that would be one way to at least expose the people who are holding everything up in our government. So again, please share those thoughts with her, and please let her know that I think she's absolutely fabulous. Thank you. And thank you for being here. And thank you, Stu.
And we will, yes, we will. I think she's spoken out and said that that's one of the options she would consider, kind of putting the onus on the party that's opposing it, so we know who's opposing some of these policies. But I appreciate you mentioning that, and we can take that back to her. So thanks, Beth. I did see, I'm looking at the comments, it looks like there was a request for a bill summary. I will say, so we will have a press release tomorrow that will summarize some of the key components of the bill. And I can share that with Sue and others if that would be of interest. That would probably be the best summary of the bill. I think that was the only question that I saw in the comments, but there's others. Happy to answer those.
And we've also attached copies of the current version that hasn't yet been introduced to many of the invitations announcing this meeting. If anybody's desperate and hasn't yet received the link or the copy of the current version, just send me an email and I'll be glad to quickly send it to you, but before you get access to the official version.
Loretto, I see your hand up. You have to unmute though. There, no, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so my comment is just quickly, thank you for being here and this lovely presentation to Ben. But the comment is that I produced a teen scene and I just came back from Barbizon competition this weekend, and this is 15 years I've been doing this. This first time we had 4 transgendered teens become involved with teen scene, and we haven't seen that. Like, this is the first year we've seen that, but it's really good to see that, so they, in other words, they signed up, and it was really great to have them be able to have their opinion shared on the show. So I just want to make that comment.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. That's, this is the first year then that they've been able to participate. Is that
Well, I'm sure they've been participating, but not being feel comfortable to say that they're transgendered.
Yeah.
So now they're saying I'm transgender, does it matter? And we're like, are you a teen? And they're like, yes. And we're like, no, if you're a teenager, that's all that matters. So, but that was good to see because they've never like identified. So it means something is opening up in acceptance, if you know what I'm saying. So.
Of course.
Yeah. That was it. That's all I had to say. Just thank you for your presentation.
Of course. And again, thank you for letting me participate. If there aren't any other questions, so I can maybe turn it back to you. I think there's a second part of the presentation. Is that right?
Carrie? Carrie asked in chat about whether or not a recording of this presentation would be available. Carrie, what we generally do is a Clearinghouse on Women's Issues members generally get a copy of the newsletter, which provides a written summary and a link to the recording of the meeting in the following month. This time our written summary and our newsletter won't be out until September because we don't have scheduled Clearinghouse on Women's Issues meeting during the summer, but the recording will be posted on our website. So feel free and I will try to remember to send it to you. So it's available to everyone who would like to participate. We would particularly welcome people's help in lining up co-sponsors. Ben will announce the initial co-sponsors in the congressional information that's provided on the bill with the new bill numbers. And I've also suggested to Laura, and I think she's probably already done it, that we're trying to get co-sponsors from the Democratic Women's Caucus in the House of Representatives. Does anybody have any additional history to share? I noticed many of you have been helping with the WEA legislation. Bill Howell is one of our participants, and Bill, I don't know if you noticed that some of your suggestions got included in the most recent version of GEEA. If you want to unmute and give us any comments, feel free. Does anybody have any other comments? If you'd like, I'd love to talk more about the national gender equity infrastructure that we're proposing in the GEEA bill. It's been my impression that over the years, people have paid attention to some of the Title IX coordinators, but there's been no formal way for us to help the Title IX coordinators work with each other. And what I mean by the vertical infrastructure is that the government levels that should operate both top down and bottom up range from the state departments of education, have Title IX coordinators with various levels of responsibility, which are important for state Title IX related policies and what the states can do to help with the implement and perhaps appeal and dissemination of information on Title IX coordinators. The state should work with their school district Title IX coordinators who should work with the local school Title IX coordinators. And the school Title IX coordinators has not been an officially recognized activity. So what I'm hoping that as the national gender equity infrastructure increases, we can make it clear that all schools that are responsible for implementing Title IX have a Title IX coordinator. This has been a recognized practice in institutions of post-secondary education. And as I mentioned, the Department of Ed during the Obama administration helped us identify post-secondary institutional Title IX coordinators, because finding out who they are is very helpful if people have a problem or a challenge related to Title IX. And then for the horizontal aspects of the infrastructure, what we want to point out is that people should be working with their peers. For example, Title IX coordinators should work with their local peer Title IX coordinators, and the training activities are a wonderful way that they can do this. There are other meetings and things that can be arranged to help Title IX coordinators work together. But Title IX coordinators are often aided by other equity coordinators. In the handicapped area, there's similar legislative coordinators for handicapped in the Section 504 legislation, and that could be very helpful. And then in the, so that they should work with equity coordinators who are working on race issues, immigration issues, other issues, so that the system can all work together. And very often what one of the definitions that we want to suggested originally that Ben include, but I guess it was a little bit extraneous, was interdisciplinary Title IX coordinators and work to show that people have multiple kinds of discrimination that they face, so that there may be students, for example, who are discriminated on the basis of race, sex, and handicap, and they should all be addressed. And the people that are in charge of helping implement the civil rights law should all work together. So that's part of the horizontal nature. Also, the horizontal nature is working with many of their local school district and community stakeholders. We advise that there be Title IX advisory groups to work together. Are some of you on from ATICSA, for example? ATICSA is an organization that does a lot of Title IX training, and they've also paid attention to the stakeholders. Looks like Bill Howe has his hand up. Bill, pitch in.
Yes, sorry. So I was multitasking here and couldn't get through my pile of papers fast enough to unmute, but I wanted to also thank Sue and Connie both for all the work they've done on this topic. Sue and I have worked together, for a million years now. And I just want to support what some of the comments were that she just made. As a state Title IX coordinator for Connecticut years ago, Sue and I worked together to try to find out who my counterparts were around the country, because I was feeling kind of lonely, and I physically called every state government capital to try to find out who was Bill Howe in Iowa or wherever the case might be. And to my surprise, I found out that a lot of people didn't know who the state Title IX coordinator was. And when we identified that person, they didn't realize they had anything to do So that's been a huge problem for those of you in your variety of states. So one thing you could do is to call your state Department of Education and identify that person and just remind them they have some responsibilities. Along with that, Sue is absolutely correct. When Connecticut long ago took on Title IX very strenuously and began training school districts and school district Title IX coordinators, we began asking school districts to identify who their building level person was. And everyone volunteered to identify a person, and then we got them into training. Each year we would hold 3 or 4 sessions, and people would come to training to be building level and school district Title IX coordinators. And to our not surprise, complaints went down. Issues got resolved. People in buildings, parents, students, staff found out what Title IX was, and they found out that there was actually a person in their building that could help them. So my phone calls went from 10 or 15 calls a week on Title IX down to some weeks I had to pick up the phone to make sure it was still working. So, so the advocacy for building level Title IX coordinators is absolutely essential. And the last thing I just want to say is I think early on, Sue mentioned Ken Marcus sending out a note to all superintendents, SEA folks, and so on about Title IX. And I never got that email. I never got that memo. In the 18 years I was the state Title IX coordinator, I never got a direct communication from the State Department of Education regarding anything. I would find out information by contacting Sue, contacting the National Women's Law Center. So I would strongly encourage OCR to take a much forward approach in identifying state level Title IX coordinators, building level Title IX coordinators, putting their names and contact information on the website and making sure that we're on the mailing list so that we can be much more effective around this area. So I guess I've had the experience of knowing that when you do have someone identified, they take on the responsibility. And when training is conducted, we have a much more effective way of promoting Title IX and making sure that people have access. Just one final comment. One of the reasons I was distracted was that I'm trying to help out someone who's been calling me about a Title IX case that she's involved in. She's been involved in it for 6 years now. She's actually in court, and she's been texting me for days now asking for help. And when I asked her, don't you have a lawyer? She said, yes, but he doesn't know anything about Title IX. And I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but if there are any lawyers out there, is there any way to disbar a lawyer from taking out a case that they know nothing about? He's been taking this woman's money for 6 years now, and just doesn't know anything about the field. So it's been frustrating, and I feel badly for this poor person trying to deal with this. So thank you for allowing me to vent, and I'll stop talking.
Bill, thank you for some of those, for all of those comments. And I just want to mention that the Feminist Majority Foundation tries to keep a list of state Title IX coordinators. And I was just sending them some messages, and a lot of them are bouncing as people retire and change positions. But we do have a list on our website, and I'm trying to keep it updated. It's very important for the federal government to highlight and make lists and insist that we have electronic databases of Title IX coordinators so people can find them. Also, I'd like to point out that although the Title IX regulations ask for information on Title IX coordinators, the regulations were written in 1975. And you know, that was before we had internet, before we had webs. So it needs to be updated, and it was updated to some extent in the 2015 guidance that the Obama administration gave on Title IX coordinators, but we don't even know why the DeVos administration rescinded those guidance documents, but now's an
They
opportunity
did
to
right.
improve them and reissue them. And we hope that OCR will do that quickly, as well as establishing for the first time a high-level office for gender equity.
Sue, I'm wondering how many people on the Zoom today are actually the Title IX coordinators for either their state or their local school district. If you are, could you write either Sue or me and tell me where you're the Title IX coordinator? That would be great. Thank you.
And if you are visible, if you could raise your hand, that would be nice too. Great idea, Connie.
Can I make one more statement real quick?
Sure.
I just want to say that the reason I brought that up, at that competition recruits in schools from Boston all along the Eastern Seaboard down to Virginia. And so that means that that competition is open to, and the school must have allowed, have a program that allows transgender identity, if you know what I'm saying, for them to be able to enter the competition. So I just think that that's a good thing, that some of the schools are cooperating with education the way you're looking for it, but we need more, of course.
Well, there's certainly a lot more we can do. Do anyone else? Does anyone else have comments or suggestions, or fill us in on what you all are doing to advance Title IX? And I see Perry Evenstad, who's director of an Equity Assistance Center. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you all are doing on gender equity work?
Hi, Sue. It's so good to see you and to see Connie and to see Bill. Well, we've been responding to the requests we get from our state and local school districts on training for Title IX, including the updates. And we've had a lot of requests recently on some investigation work and training on investigations. So we're kind of, putting together some of those kinds of trainings to meet people's needs and kind of working with consultants as well at this point in time. So Bill, I might tap into you soon. So with that being said, we're just kind of plugging along right now. Our request for proposals for competition for this year was pulled back a couple weeks before our grant was due. So we have a year's extension on this current contract for the Equity Assistance Centers. So sorry, my cat's talking. He's a Siamese, what can I say? Let me grab him. Okay, he just needs to be part of the program. We're working to prepare for that as well as and address our Title IX needs. We've been doing a lot of kind of webinars. We have a virtual college component on our website that anyone can access on our trainings dealing with both race, gender, national origin, and religion. And one of my principal analysts did a very good piece on transgender students that is receiving a lot of, shall I say, I guess, viewing time out there. So that's always good. So with that being said, that's kind of what we've been up to. And thank you, Sue, so much for all the work you do. I can't tell you how many times I do refer to your list of Title IX coordinators, even though not all of them are responsive in my region, because I serve 13 states and 3 territories now. So with that being said, thanks a lot for all your hard work.
Good, and I will ask you, I'll send you my most current updated list when I update it, and ask you to help us fill us in on any of the ones that you know about that we don't know about yet.
I would be glad to help in any way.
And also I know that you can work with the states in your region and others to help support and find sponsors for GEEA.
Yes, I will mention it to my fellow equity assistance directors. I should be speaking with them in the next day or two, so I will put in a plug for that as well.
Because the grants competition can supply a lot of funds to help locals get started and make a big impact on their gender equity work. And even if they don't get funded, the act of writing a proposal to say what they should be doing will perhaps encourage them to do it without even fundings. We often find that with grants proposals. So let's hope that that's another way we can expand our work in gender equity.
And Sue, CWI has been supporting over the years Teen Scene, and I intend to do a half-hour Teen Scene just on transgender because of having these kids apply. So that's what I hope to do, is a half-hour show on transgender for the Teen Scene program.
Okay. I notice Holly Knox is on, and Holly was one of the original guiding forces in GEEA. Holly, do you want to give any connections that you were thinking of between GEEA and GEA and what we should do in the future?
No, it sounds like you're doing great things. So, and I'm going to contact my congresswoman and, do what I can to support them.
Great,
So,
thanks.
Nice to know that this is all continued.
We have to recruit more and more people to help us out. Are there any other comments or experiences that you all have? Jeanette, do you want to share anything from your wonderful experience in the Department of Ed, or disappointing experiences in some years? You're still on mute.
Yes, I've been really involved with the hearing that the Office for Civil Rights has just completed on comments regarding the DeVos sexual harassment regulation. And that's taken a lot of time because it's really getting into the nitty-gritty details. And unless we give that attention, the regulation that was promulgated in 2020 by Trump and DeVos will eventually be very harmful to sexual harassment. It's difficult enough for those individuals who have been harassed to be brave enough and come forward to file complaints and follow up. But with the regulation that was put in place, it made it even more difficult. So that's been taking a lot of attention. I'm happy to see the efforts to continue to develop the supports that are needed for the EPA and Title IX enforcement.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or suggestions or experiences that you want to relate? Ideas? Ben, do you have anything else you want to say?
No, again, just thank you to Sue and everyone else who's provided feedback on the bill. And thank you for allowing me to present today. It's great to see everyone, so many faces.
Well, thank you all in particular. And now I'd like to turn our meeting over to Jeanette, who will manage the call for our nominations for Clearinghouse on Women's Issues Board of Directors. And we'd like to invite all of you who are members of the Clearinghouse on Women's Issues to please stay on so that you can vote for the folks who have agreed to run again for their important positions.
I was thinking about a situation when I was on an airplane a few years ago and had a wonderful chat with a second grade teacher who was sitting next to me, and discovered that she had been teaching for 20 years and she had no clue what Title IX was about.
Mm.
Or even what it was. And one should never go from, you know, a unique incident to a generalization, but we have been unable to really get serious gender equity training and teacher training programs. So I hope that when GEA is eventually passed and authorized and the funding is put in, that there'll be some effort to get it into teacher training, because frankly, everybody who is near children in a school needs to understand what the law is and what it means, even and what they can do, even as though they don't have administrative responsibility. So I want to thank Ben again, and it's been a really great program. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for all your help with the research and the work on Title IX coordinators.